The Minnesota Vikings matchup versus the Los Angeles Rams is now just a few days away. Whether that will be in Los Angeles or Arizona, we have yet to find out, but most likely it will be Arizona. And Kevin O'Connell took to the podium on Thursday afternoon in front of a crew of reporters and was asked several questions, of course, leading up to this playoff game about Sam Darnold and about the team and how they're preparing and yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. And he was asked a very interesting question about a certain quarterback on the Minnesota Vikings roster. Because here's the deal with Daniel Jones. The Minnesota Vikings were able to sign him to their practice squad when the New York Giants released him. And in order to get the full advantage of having Daniel Jones on the roster, the Minnesota Vikings needed to activate him, because if he leaves this offseason, then the Minnesota Vikings get a compensatory pick for the NFL draft. And that's a good thing. You got a guy in a roster. If he leaves, you get a pick. If he stays, he's your backup quarterback. It's kind of a win-win either way. So the Minnesota Vikings activated Daniel Jones after the Minnesota Vikings lost to the Detroit Lions, which makes things very interesting, because one would most likely argue that Daniel Jones was activated for the pick, for the draft pick. But Daniel Jones could potentially step in if Sam Darnold puts together a performance like he did against the Detroit Lions. Now, Darnold just played his worst game of the season, and he's coming off of a season where he threw 35 touchdowns and 12 picks. So the likelihood that he gets benched has to be near 0%. But is there a point in time that Kevin O'Connell would bench Sam Darnold if through the first 2.5 quarters of football, Darnold is playing the exact same way as he was versus the Detroit Lions? I mean, how do you not seriously consider it? Especially because Daniel Jones has playoff experience. So here's the quote by Kevin O'Connell during the Minnesota Vikings press conference, and this is an article on ESPN.com written by Kevin Seifert. He writes, or the quote, "Jones definitely has progressed," O'Connell said. He's gotten a lot of really good work in both the running scout team works and then just extra work here and there when he can with quarterbacks coach Josh McCown and Nick and Brett Rippon as well. The best way I can put it is we're doing everything we can to get Sam ready to go. But at the same time, whether it's Nick or Daniel or Brett, having all of those guys absorbing the game plan, like always, it's such a fluid thing here the rest of the way. We are going to do whatever we think gives us the best chance to win. So those are some interesting comments, because Kevin O'Connell is not admitting really anything, which is classic Minnesota Vikings press conference. The Minnesota Vikings head coach and general manager are podium assassins. They give the reporters nothing but something at the same time. He didn't come out and admit that Daniel Jones was the third emergency quarterback. He didn't come out and admit that Daniel Jones was the backup quarterback. What Kevin O'Connell did is he left room open for speculation and rumors and intriguing pieces written all over the internet on where Daniel Jones will be as this Los Angeles Rams game approaches. And Kevin O'Connell was asked a second time a follow-up question to his original comment, hoping that there would be some explanation or elaboration by Kevin O'Connell. And he says again, we're going to do whatever it takes to give us the best chance to win here the rest of the way. Now, the comments about Brett Rippon, he's on the practice squad. But the one thing that Kevin O'Connell made note of, he said, it's such a fluid thing here the rest of the way. That's something. That's not nothing. However, Kevin O'Connell did not come out and admit that Daniel Jones is going to be the backup versus the Los Angeles Rams, although that is going to be what happens. Nick Mullins is not going to be the backup to Sam Darnold if Sam Darnold goes out there, gets hurt, or is a complete bum through 2.5, 3 quarters of this football game. Kevin O'Connell keeps things close to the chest. This guy wouldn't admit that 2 + 2 is 4. This guy wouldn't admit that mosquitoes bite. This guy wouldn't admit that Ed Donatell is a terrible defensive coordinator, and that's why the Minnesota Vikings fired him. You know, you ask him any of those questions, and he'd be like, yeah, 2 + 2 might equal 4, but, there might be a different language or a different country that believes something else. So, I'm open to different possibilities. You ask him about mosquitoes, and Kevin O'Connell is going to come out and say, you know what? They're just trying to survive and make a living off of people. And you know what? An occasional bite happens, but, we got to deal with it. It's not too bad. And the last one, he'd come out and say, you know what? Our players just probably didn't fit the scheme of Ed Donatell. And it's not that he's a bad defensive coordinator. It's not even the reason why we fired him. And it just wasn't a good fit. The chemistry, the guy won't admit anything. He is the best at silencing everybody. And he's a professional podium speaker. He knows how to get the press conference done without having any quotable moments. Kevin O'Connell is one of the most unquotable head coaches I think the Minnesota Vikings have ever had in their organization. Because he gives you nothing. But you look at this quote and you look at Daniel Jones and you think about where he would rank as quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, and he's way better, more talented than Nick Mullins. He's won a playoff game against Kevin O'Connell and the Minnesota Vikings. Now, I would go as far to say that Kevin O'Connell's comments are even a little foolish. Because, now he's not a foolish guy, but these comments are a little foolish. Because if you name Daniel Jones as the backup quarterback to Sam Darnold entering this football game, it's not like the Los Angeles Rams are preparing for Daniel Jones. It's not like the other team is going to take a day or a half a day to think about what Daniel Jones is going to provide the Minnesota Vikings in case an injury happens to Sam Darnold or he just plays bad. The Rams have more important things to deal with. So why is Kevin O'Connell keeping this thing so close to its chest? Why is it such a secret on who is going to be the backup quarterback? The quote that really kills me in this whole thing is, the best way I can put it is we're doing everything we can do to get Sam ready to go. But at the same time, whether it's Nick or Daniel or Brett, he just names all his quarterbacks. Having all those guys absorbing the game plan like always, it's like, what does that have to do with anything? Brett Rippon, come on. He's on the practice squad. What does Brett Rippon have to do with anything? He just names every single quarterback on the roster and talks about the game plan, and he just going in circles round and round and round we go. In all honesty, which this podcast was 100% honest 100% of the time, this is what I want my head coach to be. I don't want my head coach going out there and making quotables for the other team or making players bitter, because that's really what he's doing. He's protecting Nick Mullins and Daniel Jones in this instance and saying, you know what? We're going to do whatever gives us the best chance to win. And closer to game day, if he hasn't already, he will tell the players where they stand on the depth chart. So that's probably, it's not probably what he's doing. That is what he's doing. Kevin O'Connell's protecting the feelings, the sensitivity of the NFL players inside the locker room. But as a fan, as a podcast host, as someone that talks about the Minnesota Vikings all the time, daily, weekly, like, give us a little something. Give us something to bite on. And come on. Give us a little something to chew on. And what was so interesting following Kevin O'Connell's comments is that he had a little smirk on his face. I watched the video, and Kevin O'Connell, as he was responding to the follow-up question by Kevin Seifert asking for a further explanation to his reasoning on, we'll do whatever gives us the best chance to win, blah, 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 blah. He gave a little smirk on the side of his face. And if you have not seen that, I suggest you do. So, Kevin O'Connell, podium assassin, does what he does by not sharing a single item. Classic Kevin O'Connell. He wouldn't admit that snow is white or that it's cold in Minnesota. I know the temperature, it goes down, but cold is whatever. Cold is all opinionated based on who thinks whatever. Man. Kevin O'Connell, brilliant head coach, brilliant at the podium. But man, just gives you nothing but something at the same time. And it's like, those comments mean nothing. But there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of sidetracks that you could go with those comments. So they're almost better than actually saying that Daniel Jones is the backup quarterback, because a lot of those for speculation. So anyways, going off the rails here. Thank you for watching this episode. Thank you for making this podcast a part of your day. I appreciate you all. Thanks for going on this journey with me, and we'll talk to you soon. Very, very soon.